as we continue, of course, to bring you some reaction, as Avis has recalled vehicles currently leased to the city through a fleet contractual arrangement. Now, the Metro's rented vehicles, which include cars, bakkies and trucks from different departments, were repossessed due to non-payments. This withdrawal of the fleet will hinder the city's ability to fulfill its policing duties, like responding to criminal complaints by residents, as well as the city's ability to respond to the grave water challenges that confront residents daily. Let's now bring you some reaction. We're joined by Dada Morero, the ANC's chairperson in Johannesburg. Very good evening to you. Thank you so much for coming to us in studio.
Good evening, Paul.
Now, perhaps as I look at you now as we speak, I'm looking at a tweet that you sent out. It says today Avis Car Rental is removing all its cars because of non-payment by the DA-led municipality, multi-party government, compromising the ability of the city to maintain road safety during the festive season. It looks like the ripple effect is going to be massive. When and how did you learn of this incident? Because, I mean, you've got pictures here that you took.
No, well, remember, we are councillors in the city of Johannesburg, and we have to conduct oversight in different departments, and part of the work involves getting such information at hand. And it was sent to us, and we had to verify, and it was confirmed, yes, indeed, Avis was taking some of its cars on the basis that, one, the city has not honored their part by paying the contract, which they're supposed to pay on a monthly basis. And of course, this relates to the fact that the ANC has argued consistently since August, July. We want the city of Johannesburg that the way things are, their financial position is not in a good state, and they went on to deny it consistently. Now it's for the communities to now see that what we were saying was true. As a result of that, Avis then took its car because there's no money to pay them.
The DA in turn says that this is not their problem. They say they inherited this problem from the ANC because of an irregular contract dating back from around 2020.
No, let's correct it properly. In 2016, the DA took power. In 2018, the process of the tender, which was initiated by the ANC in 2016 before went out of power to finalize the appointment of the fleet contract, was of course abandoned by the DA in 2018, and they chose to opt for what is called Regulation 32, which Regulation 32 was in itself irregular in a sense that it was even meshed with the city of Mohali, which in essence you can't match the two municipalities in terms of size. And as a result of that, the DA was the ones that were responsible for this tender. And in fact, they then appointed through Regulation 32. The ANC took the matter to the public protector, who eventually said the tender was irregular. When we came back in 2019, well, that contract was actually left with 6 months, and we consulted broadly and consulted with council, and it became clear that there are two things that we need to do. One was to start a new process of a tender, and secondly, appoint if possible. But within that 6 months, we would not be able to appoint, therefore extend the contract even if it was deemed to be irregular, because otherwise you'd have compromised service delivery. And in fact, we were not responsible because the Mashaba administration, the leader of Action SA, that had actually awarded that tender irregularly through Regulation 32.
So perhaps let me get some reaction here, because earlier on we spoke to the DA's Bongani Nkomo, who was speaking about what has happened since then. I mean, since the motion of no confidence in your time in office, signing in a fleet contract worth 2 billion rand. Let's listen in.
Well, I think it's no secret that unfortunately it's the residents that have suffered the most throughout this process. But I must add that there is a dark cloud hanging over the fleet contracts as it stands, dating back to 2020. For instance, National Treasury found that the contracts, in fact, were not above board, and they needed to be investigated, which in fact the ANC completely ignored. Secondly, we have GFIS, which is the group forensics in the city, that is conducting a number of investigations. And then finally, there is the matter of one of the bidders that has taken the city to court, in fact, claiming that the process was not above board. So that's where we find ourselves currently. What I need to add is that, in that time that Dada Morero was in the helm, he in fact approved a fleet contract worth 2 billion. But I must also just emphasize that this whole would have been avoided. In fact, we wrote to the Speaker of Council, Colleen Makubele, to highlight the urgency and the importance of this particular matter, and obviously urge her to include it in the next council sitting at the time, which was on the 27th of October. And she deemed this particular issue as not urgent. So it's quite surprising at this stage that we have, the ANC accusing, the DA of maladministration and being over our heads, where in fact they manufactured this entire issue.
So that's what
clearly Bongani is misinformed. Quite a number of issues. In fact, in 2021, GFI started speaking to, came out with a report and said there are officials that had done wrong. Remember, this was a DA contract. The ANC's last contract ended in 2016, just before we went out of power. So the new tender on fleet was actually abandoned by the Action SA leader, who was mayor then, Mayor Mashaba, abandoned the process to conclude a tender process to appoint a fleet contract. Instead, they opted for what we call Section 32, which means you don't have to go through tender. You just use the section based on what the other municipality is doing, and you award. And that's what they've done. In 2021, yes, a report came from GFIS, which fingered officials that had done wrong in the process of awarding that tender, and we went through a process to discipline them as the ANC when we were in charge. And in fact, they were suspended, they were charged, a disciplinary process went on and concluded, and they were fired.
What went wrong?
Well, there's a number of wrong things that came up at that time, which were raised, that there was a number of corruption that happened. At that time, of course, the DA was in charge. But at the time of doing the investigations, we're now in charge. So we went through the investigation. That's issues of money, bribery of officials. So that thing was in the open, and we acted as the ANC. Secondly, he also needs to be informed, Bongani, that in the period in which we were in charge now, the 25 days to be specific, we have not had any signing of any decisions, precisely because the 25 days we're still using it to do outreach programs, visiting staff, departments, understanding where the city was, establishing a war room on the financial issues, because, by the way, we became aware when we got inside that what we've been saying all along has been true. There's no money in the city, and immediately what we did was to establish a war room, was to identify what is it that needs to be done immediately for us to be able to raise and stabilize the finances of the city.
So
Bongani is not even aware, whatever is saying, as I said, is being misinformed, that currently the city is owing suppliers 5.2 billion. And they continue to deny this thing.
Let's hold on to that part. So you're saying that the fleet tender approval, the DA has said that you wasted no time in ensuring that
it has not been approved. If it was approved, no vehicles would have been taken. So there's two things here. One is the contract approval, and two is non-payment. So that matter is never approved. Instead of them bringing it to council all along, they've not bringing the report to council since they took over in 2021, November. The report they never brought to council. In fact, what they wanted to do was to suggest that there's irregularities in the contract, and therefore they were investigating the contract.
Yeah. So that investigation, what's happening to it now?
We don't know.
Because they're saying that an irregular contract has constantly been extended with no investigation.
No.
I mean, it's almost like a case of
precisely because the DA consistently extended the contract. Now they can't extend it anymore. They can't extend this contract anymore. Instead of awarding, they took an option to investigate the contract. The contract that they themselves adjudicated. They are the ones that went through the process and confirmed and said, this is the legal person we are appointing. Then suddenly they turn around and say, no. In fact, we must institute an investigation into the whole process, a process that they themselves were overseeing. So, which now led to, one, they could not even, besides the contract, by the way, they have not been paying those suppliers. That is why Avis could not take it anymore. They took their vehicles. Yesterday, they took another 20 trucks. So it's clear that service delivery is going to be hampered quite significantly as long as the DA does not pay. In fact, they don't have the money to pay.
So you have said that the party will not give up on efforts to remove Dr. Mpho-Phalatse. You, in fact, said that come Christmas or December, the ANC would have reclaimed the spot.
No, our argument has always been that, yes, we will place the motion. We are confident that the motion should be placed on the table, debated by council, and if the motion succeeds, then the motion that succeeded, we are confident that we must put that motion and we must succeed. So otherwise, we are going to see flames in the city. In fact, the cities would see chaos. We're going to see a lot of chaos. The Avis one is just one of the things. Today, the Johannesburg housing company, Josco, sent letters to all suppliers that they have no money. They will not be able to pay them. Now, imagine what happens this time of the year. Majority of companies or suppliers in the city are already preparing to pay their staff what we call bonuses or 13 checks. If they're not paid now, it means they won't be able to pay their staff bonuses because remember, you know that when you run a business, you try and ring-fence some of the money for a particular period of time, but if you're not paid for longer periods, you'll not be able to keep up with your financial obligations. And that's what's going to happen to a lot of companies. In fact, black-owned companies will not be paid this month.
So you say that you didn't sign a fleet contract. I want us to go back there.
No, we haven't signed. Had we had signed, it meant we should have taken it to council. So there are no documents of that nature that came to my table at that time. In fact, I only had one mayoral committee at that time, which was held on the day that the judgment was made. And before we could enter into serious debates or discussion items, we had to stop the meeting because the judgment was out.
But this was a problem that you foresaw yourself?
Yeah, we knew. That is why we had established a war room on finances to try and stabilize, to try and check what needs to be done, to ensure that the finances of the city are in order, to ensure that the suppliers are paid, and it would have meant to go and have negotiations and discussions with some of the suppliers who have not been paid since February this year, by the way.
Very well. We're going to have to leave it there for now.
Thank you very much
for your time. We're going to have to leave it there. Dada Morero, ANC chairperson in Johannesburg, saying that this problem could not possibly be theirs because at the time the DA was in power.